It's now time to take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe. And we begin in Abuja as President Bola Tinubu has renamed the University of Maiduguri in honor of the country's late former leader, Muhammadu Buhari. The announcement was made during a special session of the Federal Executive Council, FEC, at the State House, where tributes poured in from across the country's top political leadership. State House correspondent Adesua Omorowan reports.
A rare expanded meeting of Nigeria's Federal Executive Council, not to make policy, but to honor a man who once led from this very chamber. Tinubu led tributes to his predecessor, a longtime political ally, Muhammadu Buhari, who died on Sunday.
In a time when men had lost hope that change was possible, Muhammadu Buhari put his faith in the people of this country. We stood together, he and I, alongside others, drawn from across the political spectrum, regions and tongues. We formed an alliance that enabled Nigeria to experience the first true democratic transfer of power from one ruling party to another.
He remembered him as the former president, Mai Gaskiya, the truthful one, and the people's general. He praised Buhari's integrity, calling his life a rebuke to vice and a refuge for virtue.
The purity of his private character gave radiance to the discipline and integrity of his public service. President Buhari was not a perfect man. No leader is. But he was, in every sense of the word, a good man, a decent man, an honorable man. His record will be debated, as all legacies are, but the character he brought to public life, the moral force he carried, the incorruptible standard he presented, will not be forgotten.
Tributes also came from across government. President of the Senate, Godswill Akpabio, who was also once a minister in Buhari's cabinet, had this to say.
Where others sought glory, he sought duty. As a minister in his cabinet, appointed by him, I saw President Muhammadu Buhari unplugged. He was not flamboyant. Far from it. His voice was measured, his steps deliberate, his public demeanor austere.
He lived not for applause or affluence, but for principle, for country, and for the cause of a better Nigeria.
Cabinet ministers who had served under the late president commended his simplicity, discipline, and refusal to enrich himself in office.
I was privileged to serve him in different capacities, and I can attest to his rare discipline.
Late President Muhammadu Buhari will be remembered not only for what he built, but for the lives he touched, the people he stood for.
From the state governors came praise for Buhari's commitment to Nigeria's unity, even during its most fragile moments.
A spirit of national unity and respect for the service that resonates with Nigerians and sets a worthy example for generations to come. The state burial accorded President Buhari reflects the esteem in which he was held, not just by this administration, but by Nigerians in general.
There was an emotional moment from Buhari's son,
Friends,
Yusuf, who thanked the nation for its support.
And indeed all Nigerians at home and in diaspora for the numerous calls, messages, condolence visits, and prayers offered for the repose of the gentle soul of our departed father. Your visits, calls, and prayers symbolized a great honor to the memory of our late father.
There were also tributes for members of the federal cabinet, including Works Minister David Umahi, Health Minister Muhammad Ali Pate, and Solid Minerals Minister Dele Alake.
I also recall the time he came to commission projects in Ebonyi State. A very disciplined man, and he came by 10 a.m. and he started commission projects. And I recall that for the first time he commissioned a project at night, and that's the light tunnel that we built and named after him. And when by 10 p.m. he was going back to his room to sleep, he said something to me. Many people did not know that he was a very humorous person. And he said to me, "Governor, you know how to punish people." I said, "Mr. President, you signed for this." And he laughed, and he went to his room.
And in lasting tribute to his service, the University of Maiduguri will henceforth be known as the Muhammadu Buhari University. The special FEC meeting that just concluded forms part of a one-week mourning period declared by the federal government to mark the end of an era and celebrate one of Nigeria's most enduring leader, Muhammadu Buhari. From the presidential villa, Adesuwa Omorwan, Arise News.
All right, now let's segue to politics, as the African Democratic Congress, ADC, is demanding a full audit of Nigeria's refineries, citing recent reports that allege that successive governments have spent nearly $18 billion on the rehabilitation of the three major refineries in the country. The party questioned whether the Tinubu administration has been deceiving Nigerians, having recently spent over $2.8 billion on the refineries before declaring that they were moribund. It argues that this development, coming just months after government officials claimed that the Port Harcourt and Warri refineries had resumed partial operations, raises fundamental questions about transparency and policy coherence. It argues that successive APC administrations have poured over $18 billion into the so-called rehabilitation of Nigeria's refineries. The current administration is reported to have spent another $2.8 billion under the same pretext. Yet there is no verifiable increase in refining capacity, no observable cost efficiency, and no fuel security benefit accruing to the Nigerian people. We round up with electricity and power issues, as Nigeria's subnational governments have demanded an immediate halt to the ongoing amendment of the recently passed Electricity Act, arguing that if the move succeeds, it will see the transfer of over 5 trillion naira in subsidies from the federal government to power consumers. Coming under the Forum of Commissioners of Power and Energy, the states decried what they described as the lack of consultation by the federal government and the industry regulator, the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, concerning the extant matter. In a lengthy statement released by the chairman of the forum, Eka Williams, who doubles as the Commissioner of Power and Renewable Energy, Cross River State, and its secretary, Omale, who is the Commissioner of Power, Renewable Energy and Transport, Benue State, the group expressed profound surprise and concern regarding the proposed Electricity Act Amendment Bill 2025. The unexpected legislative move, it said, comes barely 2 years after the landmark Electricity Act 2023 was signed into law, and a period during which many states have only just begun to establish and operationalize their electricity markets under the new decentralized framework. And of course, we continue to see this very sort of staggered and sluggish pace at which the states are able to both enact the act itself and to begin to operationalize, on private and domesticated electricity in their states.
Well, I think that's going to be the issue really for many people within the legislature and, of course, just across the country, because if we're looking at the papers this morning, which we will get into later, it is something that is also discussed, not only the Senate's the opposing of this amendment, but also just looking at the tariffs associated with electricity, the subsidies too, how we're looking at specifically this surge, essentially how electricity subsidies have jumped some 220% to about 2 trillion naira. So there's a whole lot of conversations that need to be had about the state of Nigeria's electricity sector, and of course looking at the lawmaking aspect of this, whether or not there is a valid cause for the Senate to oppose the amendment of the Electricity Act. That being said, I would like to focus my comments this morning on the special edition of the Federal Executive Council meeting that took place in Abuja yesterday. It's just another example of the profound respect this administration, indeed many Nigerians, have for the former President Muhammadu Buhari. And it was quite moving to listen to all of the different tributes paid into the late president, to hear how different politicians spoke of their personal relationships with him, giving more insight into the person he was, not just as a president or as a political leader, but in their interpersonal relationships with each other. It was also quite profound to listen to Yusuf Buhari thank Nigerians for their care and consideration, the condolence visits, all of the messages that he and his family have received. I think that him and his siblings, their mother, should all be commended in terms of the strength that they've been able to display in the last few days. It's been an incredibly tough time for them. I think that when anyone goes through any type of grieving period, there is a need or really a desire for privacy, but they've been able, really forced to, put on a straight and strong face and confront Nigerians and be able to welcome the influx of well-wishers. So that's really where my comments and my attention lies with. I think it's a great thing, again, to immortalize the legacy of the former president with the renaming of the University of Maiduguri after him. I think that's something that will be, or has, if it hasn't already, will be welcomed by his family and indeed by the people who support Muhammadu Buhari, who feel especially hurt by his passing. And it would be something that I think that many Nigerians would have conversations about how best to immortalize someone. But yes, the University of Maiduguri will now be referred to as the Muhammadu Buhari University Maiduguri, and it is just another example of really the legacy that the man left on Nigeria.
At some point, he was a military administrator, they were called then, of Borno State, so it's very apt to be able to celebrate him that way. All week long, we've been in mourning, reviewing history as regards Buhari, what happened in the country. And I think we have touched many parts. And I'd like to give commendation to President Tinubu, the way he took this upon himself to celebrate the final journey of President Muhammadu Buhari. I just hope this should be a point of reference the way we celebrate other past leaders, because we've had other past leaders die in this country and they've not seen this level of fanfare and attention to detail. And in that special FEC session held yesterday, which is something sort of a tribute session, which was good. In fact, I had envisaged in my mind that there was going to be sort of like a session like that. In fact, I had even thought about a day of tribute of some sort, but I'm happy that he did that with this FEC session. And kudos to President Tinubu being present there and paying his last respect. I mean, this picture speaks a million words there. Moving off that quickly, I'll talk about the two issues. You see, it's very pertinent, the issue the ADC raised this morning. Because in a country where you don't have accountability, you can never have success. And that's why when my friend and brother Tope Fashua was saying that we need a big size of budgets to be able to do infrastructure, I said, no, we need scrutiny. And I'll give you some empirical facts about how much has been spent. And why I'm going to put this at the doorstep of the APC was because when Atiku Abubakar did say that he's going to sell off the refineries, they say he wanted to sell it to his cronies. When Olusegun Obasanjo sold the refineries to Aliko Dangote so that the private sector can revamp, some people went to tell lies to Umar Musa Yar'Adua, and they reversed that sale. But where are we today? Since the Yar'Adua days to now, we've spent close to $30 billion, and we've got nothing out of it. From 2015, probably when Buhari took over, $908 million first spent. $396 million, 2013 to 2017, turnaround. 2015 to 2020, 1.5 trillion, that's $4.1 billion at 360 USD. 2019 to 2020, to 2019 to 2020, $23 million again. Another operational losses. Maintenance, annual maintenance accounts, over $333 million at 360 per USD. 2020 to 2022, 11.3 trillion. That's about $25 billion at varying exchange rate of 450 USD over the decade. 2021, 2023, Port Harcourt and Warri Refinery Rehabilitation, $2.9 billion. The question is, how are we going to account for all of these monies? Because at some point, I remember how the APC also held, and we joined the APC to hold the PDP in scrutiny and say, the 16 billion that is spent in power, even if we've not been able to see the empirical summation of that 16 billion, and the PDP has not debunked there's no 16 billion anywhere, we said, how was the money spent? But now we have a money trail. How was this money spent? If not for anything, what about the forensics of these over 2 billion spent in recent time that we have seen the corruption agencies write letters to some people that served in the NNPC? Where is that case going? Where is that case going? We have it on footage when the leaders of the NNPC a couple of years ago did say that refineries will work. They told us that refineries were working. Are they working today? Where is the petrol from the Warrior and Port Harcourt refinery? Some journalists went there and by. Journalists! And took pictures and photo ops from there. Where is the oil from that refinery today? That's what we're asking for accountability. At least we hear of Dangote's oil from the refinery. We see it. Dangote, when he pushes out his oil, he says, go and buy from certain petrol stations. I'm not going to advertise them. And you can buy from them at a cheaper price. Where are the petrol stations that stock? Because you still have a lot of cases of import. At some point, the NNPC had to import. As of January this year, and we have refineries on ground, we should ask questions and demand accountability. So what we ask is accountability on that. And whatever investigations they're having as regards how that over $2 billion was spent, we must see the end of the matter. If the Warrior refinery is working and is producing oil, they should show us. They should show us. If the Port Harcourt refinery is working and producing crude petrol, they should show us. Where is all of these things? As regards the bill that is in the House today, the bill has been pushed by Inaya Barbe. And what they're pretty much, those in opposing the bill are saying that the state governments are fighting back because the over 5 trillion in subsidy will not be passed on to citizens if you say, okay, let's decentralize and push all of this autonomy to the states. It's going to cause a lot of problems. And they are saying there was no enough stakeholders engagement. So these are the conversations they're having back and forth. But the bill is still going through the legislative process. You know, those in the state authorities have highlighted this. They've talked about the subsidy regime and all of that and how it's going to be passed on to them. Going forward, there is no contention about it. We need some level of investment in the electricity market, and we need infrastructures to be built. We also need production capacity to scale. The part that government handles has to do a lot with the distribution. You have, the transmission, the TCN. The distribution companies are those that, they get power, they put it on the grid. So it is that part that is a missing portion, because the argument have always been made that the guys that load the power on the grid from their distribution company, the discos, sometimes they say the capacity of the transmission company cannot take what they are loading on. And that's why you have shortfalls. Anytime we say we have system collapse, it's not that they're not producing power. It's because of the inefficiencies of that grid system, the SCADA or something they call it. That's why you're having a faux pas. The question we should now ask is, where is the Siemens deal? Where are we as regards that? The Siemens deal was to be able to bring about transformers. I heard recently that some transformers came in and everything. But we want to see important systemic results as regards that deal. We famously remember that deal because that was the deal Awa Kyari went to sign before he passed. Where are we as regards that deal? But we also remember the debacle when Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie was somewhere in Germany and she was asking Angela Merkel about the deal and she felt a level of ignorance. And the government had to respond to that scenario. So where are we? How will we be able to revamp the grid? What's the capacity of doing that? Because even if you have a lot of production capacity and you produce power and you load it on the grid that is not working, then you have problems.
Absolutely. And just to conclude that line of thought on issues of power, our struggle towards energy security continues to come with challenges, and we're struggling to overcome some of the major challenges. And at this point, we've gotten to the place where we're asking ourselves, what is energy security worth if the people cannot afford to pay for it? And that is where we are, is that there's an agreement that mini grids are the way to go. The states should have their autonomy over those grids, but it's now come down to the cost to the consumer. what is the purpose? What's the point of having 24-hour electricity if the common man cannot afford it? So these conversations will continue to happen as we try to see how we can strike a middle ground. I remember last time we were speaking about electricity subsidy, I brought up the case of Germany, who have just reintroduced electricity subsidy to try and boost production in their economy. So subsidy in itself is not bad. I think we always have to reinforce that, but it's how we are able to manage and execute and corruption-proof these subsidies and ensure that truly the value is being delivered to the end user. I'm going to quickly go to the special FEC meeting held in honor of the late former President Muhammadu Buhari and the glowing tributes that were shared there. So many touching moments, several insights as well into who the late president was behind closed doors. One of the major highlights for me was the immortalizing of the late former president by the naming of the university, renaming of University of Maiduguri to the Muhammadu Buhari University. Of course, we already know that he was a governor of the Northeast region at the time. Beyond that, he has several ties to Borno, his mom being a Kanuri woman herself. And then also during the time he served as a brigadier in the army and they were repelling Chadian forces from the border. It is written by a book by Chris Ali, I believe, that some of his best days in the military were spent in Borno during that fight against the Chadian forces. So all in all, a befitting place and a befitting institution to immortalize after the late former president. But several questions. The first conversation that came up when this happened is that people said, well, remember when Goodluck Jonathan tried to rename Unilag after MKO Abiola, and there were protests and people kicked back and people said that a president cannot rename a federal institution by presidential fiat, that there's a process that it has to go through. And it was so heated that President Goodluck Jonathan had to reverse that decision within a matter of days, if not weeks. So in the spirit of that, I think we look forward to the process going through smoothly because it does need to go through the legislative process. These universities are created under University Acts by the Constitution. There was an amendment made a few years ago to the University of Maiduguri Act, but it didn't refer to issues of name changing. Of course, we know that it will certainly sail through the National Assembly and so forth, but we do look forward to the due process being followed in the renaming of this institution. Now to the issues of privatization. Privatization has become quite a sore conversation. When you think privatization, you think of the Bureau of Public Enterprise, you think of Ajao Kuta Steel that was built for $1.4 billion and then sold for $30 million. You think of Nitel, you think of Nigeria Airways. Unfortunately, this is the track record that we've had with privatization. Of course, in the cement industry, some people might argue that we've recorded some successes there because the cement privatization has been able to lead to greater production and greater output, and we're now a net exporter of cement. But generally, in a broader scale, the process of privatization has been questionable. So I think it is in order that the ADC is coming to say that, okay, if we're to succumb to the pressure that is coming from all parts of society, that it's time to do away with these refineries, let it not be an opaque transaction that benefits the pockets of a few individuals who are close to the transaction, and then we all move on and act like nothing ever happened, because a significant amount of public investment has been made. A significant amount of public goodwill has been utilized on the hope of NNPC and state-owned refineries operating and being able to provide and sustain the Nigerian economy. Well, it seems like those dreams and hopes have been dashed, as the body language reads that privatization is the decision we'll finally go through, a conversation that has been happening for decades. But it looks like this particular leadership of the NNPC is likely to follow through on that. So many questions, many of which have been raised by Rufai, but I add to those, what is happening with the subsidy, the savings from the subsidy, that we know only half of which are currently being remitted to the federal government. And we are told that there are several encumbrances within NNPC and so forth. But our hope was that, number one, if we're able to remove the subsidy, number two, if we're able to get our local refineries working, that there would be some sort of felt impact in the economy. It was supposed to bring reprieve and relief in various ways. Now, just a few days ago, Alhaji Aliko Dangote was talking about the fact that, well, the numbers that have been widely shared over the years as daily consumption figures of petroleum in Nigeria are inaccurate. We spoke of 50 million liters per day. He says, well, it's closer to 12 or 13 million liters per day. So it almost seems like there's some sort of a discrepancy. Again, who is benefiting from this discrepancy? So when it comes to the refineries, there are so many gray areas and so many places that need to be investigated. That audit is in order. It needs to be forensic, it needs to be public, and it needs to be accessible and thorough.